There's one betrayal that never fully leaves an empath's body, not the lies, not the cheating, not even the cruelty that so often comes wrapped in false apologies. Those wounds heal, eventually, in their own strange time. But there is one specific betrayal, one particular moment that happens in almost every narcissistic relationship, that an empath carries for years, sometimes for the rest of her life, long after everything else has faded into distant memory. It's not the betrayal of the affair. It's not the betrayal of the lies. It's the betrayal of being punished for believing in them. Stay with me, because this is the one thing almost nobody talks about when it comes to healing from narcissistic abuse, and it might be the exact wound you've been carrying without ever having the words for it. Here's what I mean. An empath doesn't fall in love the way most people do. She doesn't just notice someone's good qualities and appreciate them. She sees potential. She sees who someone could become, who they're capable of being underneath the noise, the defensiveness, the walls they put up to protect themselves from a world that's hurt them before. And when an empath loves someone, she doesn't just love who they are in this moment. She loves who she believes they can become. This is beautiful when it's reciprocated. It's one of the most generous forms of love that exists. But when it's directed at a narcissist, it becomes the exact mechanism of her own destruction. Because here's what happens. In the beginning, that belief feels like magic to them. It feels intoxicating to be seen the way an empath sees you. Not just your surface, not just your charm, but some imagined depth, some hidden goodness she's convinced is in there somewhere, waiting to be coaxed out by enough patience, enough love, enough understanding. For a narcissist, this kind of belief is irresistible, not because they want to become that better version of themselves, but because being believed in, being idealized, being seen as someone capable of depth and change, that feeling itself becomes another form of supply. They don't want to earn the belief, they just want to consume it. So they let her believe. They perform just enough growth, just enough vulnerability, just enough emotional depth to keep that belief alive, to keep the fuel flowing. A single tear at the right moment, a whispered confession about their difficult childhood, a moment of seeming self-awareness. I know I have issues. I'm working on it. You're the first person who's ever really understood me. And an empath, hearing this, doesn't hear manipulation. She hears an invitation. She hears someone finally being honest, finally letting her in, finally showing her the real him underneath all the defenses. And so she does what empaths do. She leans in harder. She gives more grace. She extends more patience. She invests even more of herself into this vision of who he could become. This is the trap closing, and she doesn't even feel it happening, because the belief itself becomes a kind of contract in her mind, even though she never consciously agreed to it, even though he certainly never intended to honor it. She starts operating as if her faith in him is a promise he's obligated to eventually fulfill. She starts making excuses for the present because she's so invested in the future she's convinced is coming, the version of him that finally treats her the way she treats him, that finally shows up the way she always shows up, that finally becomes worthy of everything she's already given. And this is where the real betrayal begins to take shape. Not in one dramatic moment, but slowly, through 1,000 small confirmations that the person she believed in was never actually trying to become that person at all. Every time she extends grace and instead of growth, she gets exploitation. Every time she forgives and instead of gratitude, she gets entitlement. Every time she gives him the benefit of the doubt, and instead of rising to meet her belief in him, he uses that benefit of the doubt as cover to sink even lower, because he's learned there will be no real consequences no matter what he does, because she's already decided who he is beneath the behavior, and she'll keep waiting for that person to show up no matter how long it takes. This is when something devastating starts to happen inside an empath, something she often can't even name until much later in therapy, in journaling, in some quiet moment of painful clarity years down the road. She starts to feel punished for believing in him, because that's exactly what it feels like, punishment. Every time she chooses hope over evidence, she gets hurt worse than the last time. Every time she chooses compassion over self-protection, the consequences get more severe. It's as if the relationship is actively teaching her through repeated escalating pain that her capacity for belief, the very thing she considered one of her most beautiful qualities, is actually a liability, a weakness, a vulnerability he learned to exploit with more and more precision the longer they were together. And here's the cruelest part of all, the part that creates the specific betrayal we're talking about today. It's not just that he failed to become who she believed he could be, it's that he used her belief against her. He weaponized her hope. He turned her most generous, most loving quality into the very leash he used to keep her compliant, keep her hoping, keep her staying through things no person should ever have to endure. Because as long as she believed change was coming, she would tolerate almost anything in the meantime. As long as she believed the real him was still in there somewhere, she would excuse the version of him standing right in front of her, the one who lied to her face, who humiliated her in front of others, who made her feel crazy for noticing patterns that were plainly, undeniably real. This is the mechanism. This is how an empath's greatest strength gets converted into her deepest source of suffering. And by the time she finally sees it clearly, really sees it, not just intellectually understands it, but feels the full weight of what it means, the damage runs so much deeper than a broken heart. Because now she doesn't just grieve the relationship, she grieves her own judgment. She starts questioning the very quality that made her who she is, her ability to see the good in people, her willingness to believe in second chances, her instinct to extend compassion even to those who've hurt her. Because that quality, the one she used to be proud of, the one that friends and family always admired about her, that quality is precisely what kept her trapped for so long, precisely what allowed someone who never deserved her loyalty to keep receiving it anyway. And this is where the real, lasting betrayal takes root. Not just betrayal by him, but something far more insidious. The beginning of betrayal by herself, against herself, questioning whether her own heart can ever be trusted again. Because if believing in someone this deeply could lead her here, to this level of exhaustion, this level of self-abandonment, this level of confusion about what's even real anymore, then what does that mean about her ability to trust her own instincts going forward? What does that mean about her ability to ever open her heart again without wondering if she's simply setting herself up for the exact same pain disguised in a different face? This is the quiet, insidious aftermath that so few people talk about, because the world tends to focus on the dramatic parts of narcissistic abuse, the lies, the manipulation, the discard. But almost nobody talks about this specific wound, the moment an empath stops trusting her own capacity for belief, because that capacity was the exact thing that got exploited. And here's what makes this betrayal so uniquely painful, so different from any other kind of heartbreak. It's not just about losing him, it's about losing a part of yourself that felt sacred. Your ability to believe in people, to see their potential, to love generously and openly, that's not just a personality trait. For an empath, it's often core to her entire identity. It's how she experiences love, how she experiences connection, how she makes sense of the world around her. So when that exact quality becomes the mechanism of her own suffering, it doesn't just hurt, it fractures something foundational. It creates a kind of internal exile, where she starts to feel like a stranger to her own instincts, like she can no longer trust the very heart that used to feel like her greatest gift. And this is precisely why this particular betrayal lingers so much longer than the others. The lies fade. The specific arguments blur together over time. Even the image of his face, once so vivid, so central to her entire emotional world, eventually starts to soften around the edges, becoming less sharp, less present in her daily thoughts. But this quiet wound of no longer trusting her own belief in people, this can linger for years. It shows up in unexpected places, in the hesitation before trusting a new friend who seems genuinely kind, in the suspicion that creeps in when a new partner does something thoughtful, some part of her waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the kindness to reveal itself as just another performance, another version of the same manipulation dressed up in a different disguise. It shows up in the way she second guesses her own perception, asking herself constantly, Am I being naive again? Am I falling for the same pattern? Is this real, or am I just seeing what I want to see, the way I did before? This hypervigilant self-doubt, ironically, becomes its own kind of prison, because the very awareness that was supposed to protect her, the awareness of how she got hurt before, starts to prevent her from experiencing genuine connection even when it's right in front of her. She becomes so afraid of repeating the mistake of believing too easily that she starts to withhold belief entirely, even from people who have given her every reason to trust them. This is one of the most painful ironies of healing from a narcissist. The very qualities you're trying to protect, your ability to trust, to connect, to believe in people, can become so guarded, so hyper-defended, that you end up punishing innocent people for a crime someone else committed against you. But here's where the real healing work begins, and it's more nuanced than most people realize, because the solution isn't to stop believing in people altogether. That would just mean the narcissist won in a different way. Not by keeping you trapped in the relationship, but by permanently damaging your capacity for connection long after he's gone. The real work is learning the difference between blind belief and discerning belief. Blind belief says, I will believe in your potential no matter what evidence contradicts it, no matter how many times you disappoint me, no matter how much pain this belief costs me. This is the kind of belief that got exploited. The kind that has no boundaries, no conditions, no requirement that reality actually match the story you're telling yourself. Discerning belief is entirely different. Discerning belief says, I can see your potential and I can hold hope for who you might become, but my ongoing trust and investment depend on your actions matching your words consistently over time. This is belief with accountability built into it, belief that requires reciprocity. Belief that doesn't ask her to override the evidence in front of her in favor of a story she desperately wants to be true. Learning this distinction is one of the most important shifts an empath can make in her healing journey, because it doesn't require her to become cynical or emotionally closed off. It doesn't require her to abandon the beautiful, generous quality that makes her who she is. It simply requires her to attach that quality to reality rather than fantasy. And this shift changes everything about how she moves through future relationships. She learns to watch for consistency instead of potential. She learns that someone's actions over time matter infinitely more than their words in a single emotionally charged moment. She learns that real change reveals itself through sustained behavior, not through tears, promises, or beautifully worded apologies that never translate into anything different the next day, the next week, the next year. She also learns something even more important, that she is allowed to protect her belief the way she would protect anything precious. Just as you wouldn't hand over your life savings to someone who has already proven they can't be trusted with money, she learns she doesn't have to hand over her belief, her hope, her emotional investment to someone who hasn't demonstrated they deserve it. This is not coldness. This is wisdom. And slowly, through this recalibration, something remarkable begins to happen. The empath doesn't lose her capacity for belief. She refines it. She becomes someone who still sees the good in people, who still holds space for growth and change, but who requires evidence before she invests her whole heart into that vision. This is the version of her the narcissist never anticipated. Not the version who stops believing in people entirely, but the version who believes with her eyes open, who loves with boundaries intact, who extends compassion without extending endless chances to people who have already shown her exactly who they are. And this transformation, this recalibrated, wiser, more discerning form of belief, becomes the foundation for something even more powerful, something that changes not just how she loves others moving forward, but how she finally learns to believe in herself again. Because that's really where this entire journey has been leading all along. Not toward learning how to trust others again, though that matters. Not even toward learning how to protect herself from future manipulation, though that matters too. The deepest healing happens when she finally turns that same discerning belief back toward herself. For so long, Believing in herself meant believing his version of her, believing she was too sensitive when she noticed something was wrong, believing she was the problem when the patterns kept repeating, believing her own perception couldn't be trusted because he told her so again and again in 1,000 small ways, until she genuinely started to doubt the evidence of her own eyes and ears and instincts. This is perhaps the deepest layer of the betrayal we've been talking about. Not just that he punished her for believing in him, but that in doing so, he taught her to stop believing in herself. Every time she trusted her own gut and was told she was overreacting, every time she noticed a lie and was made to feel like the one causing problems by pointing it out, every time her intuition screamed that something was wrong and she was met with charm or anger or cold dismissal until she backed down and apologized for even bringing it up, each of these moments chipped away at something essential, her ability to trust her own inner voice. And rebuilding that trust, restoring that connection to her own instincts, is the final and most important piece of this entire healing journey. It starts small. It starts with noticing a feeling of unease around someone new. And instead of immediately silencing that feeling, instead of talking herself out of it the way she used to, she lets herself sit with it. She asks, "What is this feeling trying to tell me?" Instead of assuming she's being paranoid, instead of assuming she's projecting old wounds onto a new situation, she starts to trust that her body and her instincts might actually be picking up on something real. This is terrifying at first, because trusting herself again means risking being wrong again. It means risking that old fear of becoming the naive one, the one who believed too easily, the one who got hurt because she couldn't see clearly what was right in front of her. But here's what she eventually learns, and it's one of the most liberating realizations of the entire healing process. She was never actually naive. She was targeted. There's a profound difference between those two things, and understanding that difference is what finally allows her to forgive herself. Naivety implies a failure to see clearly. But an empath in a relationship with a narcissist wasn't failing to see. She was being deliberately, systematically deceived by someone who had studied exactly what she needed to hear, exactly which vulnerabilities to exploit, exactly how to keep her hopeful enough to stay and doubtful enough of herself to never fully trust her own alarm bells. That's not a failure of perception. That's the success of manipulation, engineered specifically to override her instincts. Once she truly understands this, something shifts permanently. The shame that used to live in her chest, the shame of "how did I not see it?" starts to dissolve, replaced by something far more accurate: compassion for the version of herself who was doing her absolute best in an impossible situation, against someone who had every intention of making sure she never saw clearly until there was nothing left of her to protect. And with that shift, the relationship with her own belief system finally begins to heal. She starts trusting herself in small moments first, choosing to leave a conversation that feels off without needing to justify it to anyone, including herself, noticing when someone's words don't match their actions, and trusting that mismatch instead of explaining it away, feeling a spark of genuine, uncomplicated joy around someone new and allowing herself to simply enjoy it, instead of immediately searching for the catch, the hidden agenda, the eventual betrayal she used to believe was inevitable in every relationship. Slowly, these small moments accumulate into something larger, a rebuilt trust in her own inner compass. Not blind trust, not the naive belief that got exploited before, but earned trust, the kind that comes from testing her instincts against reality again and again, and discovering that her gut was right far more often than she ever gave herself credit for. This is the woman who finally emerges on the other side of this specific betrayal, not someone who stopped believing in people and not someone who stopped believing in love, but someone who finally fully believes in herself again. Someone who no longer needs external validation to know what's true, because she trusts her own perception enough to stand on it alone if she has to. And here's what's remarkable about this particular kind of healing. It doesn't just protect her from future manipulation, it fundamentally changes the quality of every relationship she has moving forward, romantic or otherwise. Because someone who trusts herself doesn't need constant reassurance. She doesn't need someone else to confirm her reality before she believes it. She simply knows. And that quiet, unshakable knowing becomes a kind of armor that no manipulator can ever penetrate again. Because manipulation only works on self-doubt, and she no longer carries enough of it to be moved. If she ever encounters someone like him again, and she will, because the world is full of people who operate this way, she'll recognize the pattern within moments, not years. She'll feel that familiar unease, that subtle wrongness in the way someone's words don't quite match their actions, and instead of overriding it with hope, instead of making excuses, instead of extending endless chances to someone who hasn't earned even one, she'll trust it. She'll act on it. She'll walk away before the damage even has a chance to begin. This is what it means to finally heal from the one betrayal an empath never forgets. Not forgetting that it happened. Not pretending the pain wasn't real or that the scars don't still ache sometimes late at night when old memories surface unexpectedly. But reclaiming the one thing that betrayal tried to take from her forever, her ability to believe, not in him, not in some fantasy version of who he could have been, in herself. Because in the end, the cruelest thing a narcissist ever does isn't the lying or the cheating or the cold, calculated cruelty dressed up as love. It's convincing an empath that her own heart, her own instincts, her own capacity for belief can't be trusted. And the most powerful thing she can ever do, the thing that finally closes the wound for good, is proving him wrong. Not by becoming someone hardened, someone who can never love again, someone who spends the rest of her life guarding herself against a threat that no longer exists, but by becoming someone who believes again, wiser now, clearer now, unshakable now, and who understands finally and completely that the heart he tried to break was never actually broken at all. It was just waiting to remember its own strength